Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Colorado River District's virtual State of the River event. We are going to get started in just about 2 minutes, but I'll go ahead and give a quick housekeeping technical update. We do have the chat feature disabled today, but we are going to take questions at the end of the presentation. So please go ahead and add questions as you listen today to the Q&A box, and we'll have some time at the end of the program to get to those. So again, we'll start in just about 2 minutes as we let everybody join, and thank you so much for being here. Well, good afternoon again to those joining. We're going to get going in just 1 minute. We're waiting on everybody to get on the webinar here today, but we're very grateful to have you and looking forward to getting started in just a second. Okay, well, welcome again. Thank you everyone for joining the Colorado River District's virtual State of the River event. Many of you know that the State of the River series is really a spring tradition for Western Colorado. We do these in person around our district. We have 12 scheduled this season, so please check out the links that Haley is sharing to find a local in-person event near you. But we do these events to take a look at the upcoming hydrology, to dive into Western water issues, and provide a spotlight on projects and priorities of each local community. We have seen strong attendance at all of those events. We know we are facing a very dry water year. There are significant negotiations going on the Colorado River, so we wanted to offer this virtual option to better reach all of our constituents here on the Western Slope. Before I dive into a quick overview of the Colorado River District, I want to introduce some of the faces that you're going to hear from today. My name is Amy Moyer. I'm the Chief of Strategy here at the Colorado River District. Caleb Foy is our Senior Water Resources Engineer. Lindsay DeFreitas is our Deputy Director of Public Relations and our Public Information Officer here at the district. Melissa Wills is our Community Funding Partnership Program Manager. And Haley Marquardt is our administrative specialist who will be helping us during the webinar, providing some support and some links for you to follow along to the program here today. So I hope many of you are familiar with the Colorado River District. We were formed in 1937 with a clear mission to protect West Slope water. We do that with a 15-member board of directors and a team of 25 staff members across engineering, legal, policy, funding, education, and outreach fields. We also do this work with many partners with a focus on supporting those we serve, the taxpayers of Western Colorado. We answer to you, the people who live and work in this region. So thank you again for being here, for your engagement, and for the trust you have in the Colorado River District. To set the stage again for today's speakers, the Colorado River District also has a dual mission to protect the state of Colorado's entitlements on the Colorado River. And while the Colorado River certainly is not the biggest by volume, by length, it's often referred to as one of the hardest working rivers in the country. It crosses 7 states, supports 40 million people, 5 million acres of irrigated agriculture. It serves tribal nations, national parks, and the country of Mexico. And within our district here in Western Colorado, 65% of the natural flow of the Colorado River originates right here. That means we on Colorado's Western Slope are the first link in an immense and important chain of the Colorado River Basin. So it's absolutely essential that we engage in these conversations on what's happening and what we refer to as these big river conversations on the operations of Lake Powell and Lake Mead, what is happening across the western United States as it relates to the Colorado River system. So to go over the order of operations for today's program, first, we're going to cover the state of hydrology, both here on Colorado's western slope and more broadly across the Colorado River Basin. Next, we're going to dive into those Colorado River negotiations with an eye on what's at stake for West Slope water. And finally, we're going to end on a few bright spots of how, at the Colorado River District, we are focused on long-term solutions. We're going to talk about the Shoshone Water Rights Preservation effort, and we're also going to talk about the community funding partnership that exists to support projects across the Western Slope. So with that, I want to do a quick reminder to put your questions in the Q&A box on the bottom section of your Zoom link. And I'd like to introduce it to Caleb Foy, again, our Senior Water Resources Engineer. He is going to cover an update on snowpack and hydrology.
All right. Thank you, Amy. I really appreciate it. And thanks everyone for joining us this afternoon virtually for the State of the River. I'm Caleb Foy, Senior Water Resources Engineer here at the Colorado River District, and I also serve as the district's technical lead in the Gunnison River Basin. I'll be providing a hydrology update this afternoon, which again, Amy pointed to. I will first start with a hydrology update within the district and then kind of take a bigger look at the Colorado River in general. So diving right in, I like to start off these hydrology updates with this graph from our friends over at the Colorado Climate Center. And what this graph is it's a nice way of showing 131 years of data, basically an average annual temperature across the y-axis and precipitation across the x-axis. And each one of these dots represents a year's precipitation and temperature. So as you can see, and the precipitation and temperatures for the period of October through February, again, over the last 131 years. What I like to do is I like to break this figure down into four quadrants. So in the upper right-hand corner, we have a warm and wet scenario, warm and dry in the upper left, cool and dry in the lower left, and cool and wet in the lower right. So as you can see with 2026 plotting here with the star, 2026 is well within the warm and dry category. And 2026 for this period of October through February is actually the warmest year on record that we've seen in the 131 years. And so far it's the 29th driest in that 131 year record. Now, some other years to consider that I'll also point out on this graphic are 2025 last year, which was the 17th warmest and 30th driest out of the 131 years, as well as 2002, which is used as a pretty good analogous year given the low snowpack and low runoff conditions in 2002 as the 42nd warmest and 8th driest. Now, you all might be asking yourselves, was Western Colorado the only place to experience such warm temperatures this winter? And this map does a great job of depicting that, in fact, was not the case. So you can see here in blue the River District, and surrounded by the River District throughout a majority of the Western United States is a dark red color. And that represents that this period of December through February was the warmest on record in all of those areas, starting in 1895. Winter basically skipped the Western United States. So how did those warm temperatures impact our snowpack? Well, let's take a look. So we'll start in the upper part of the district's area in the Yampa-White-Green River Basin. And what this graphic is a graph of snow-tell stations. And those snow-tell stations represent what we call snow water equivalent, which is the amount of water that is contained within the snowpack. And as you can see here, you can see the black line, which is this year's snow water equivalent in the Yampa-White-Green. And these graphs are really interesting because they show the variability from year to year in snow water equivalent throughout the course of the winter snow accumulation season. So for instance, on January 1st, as indicated by the black line, we were at the record minimum low snow water equivalent for this time of year, or for that time of year, January 1st. The blue line represents the maximum snow water equivalent for January 1st, and these color shadings indicate the ranges of different snow water equivalents that we've seen on January 1st since about the early 1980s when this data was collected. I'd also point your attention to the green line, which is the median snow water equivalent. So what you can see here from this year is that we received long periods of very dry weather, as indicated by these long, flat occurrences of the black line, which are also followed by just little blips, which indicate little storms and increasing snow water equivalent, in this case, in the Yampa Green Basin. Now, as you can see, the 2026 peak snow water equivalent unfortunately has already occurred in all of our basins. You can see here that in 2026, the snow water equivalent peaked in this basin about a month early at 12.4 inches of SWE, which is about 58% of that median peak indicated by the X. Now, shifting gears and moving to the Colorado River Basin, you can see a very similar pattern where we were following that minimum snow water equivalent and even setting new record lows throughout the snow accumulation season. Similarly, in the Colorado River Basin, we peaked in 2026 about a month early at 53% of the typical peak snow water equivalent we would expect. As you can imagine, as we move south into the Gunnison River Basin, not a whole lot changes. The snow water equivalent follows, again, that minimum trajectory, and unfortunately kind of starts taking a nosedive here more recently within the last week due to the incredibly warm temperatures. Again, the snowpack in the Gunnison River Basin peaked about a month early at just under 50% of the median peak. So all in all, a pretty poor snowpack this year, and in fact, maybe record low in many areas of the state. Now, snowpack itself isn't the only variable that goes into determining the amount of water in our streams and rivers. One good indication or helpful piece of information when trying to forecast the amount of water in our streams and rivers is the amount of snow coverage. And these maps show a really stark contrast between 2024 here on the left, which I would consider to be kind of an average snow year, if you will, and 2026 here on the right. And what you can see is a stark contrast between the aerial extent of the snow coverage, where in 2026, we have virtually no low to mid elevation snow, as indicated by the lack of blue coverage relative to a normal year like 2024. Now, when we're talking about that snow to flow relationship, it's not only snowpack that impacts how much of that snow is going to make it to our streams and rivers. Another driving variable is soil moisture. And when we look at soil moisture, we're typically looking at soil moisture going into the winter season because that's when the water locks up and it becomes frozen. So in the Yampa White Green, we see that soil moisture going into winter was near or below normal, as indicated by the orange. In the Colorado, we see that soil moisture was near to below normal to well below normal, as indicated with the orange and red. And then in the Gunnison River Basin, you kind of see a little bit of a contrast where the northern part of the Gunnison River Basin was near or below normal soil moisture, whereas the southern part of the Gunnison actually saw above or near normal soil moisture, largely attributable to those big October storms that area of the state received. Now, we've kind of dove into the various variables that go into a water supply forecast. We've talked about snow depth, we've talked about snow water equivalent, about the aerial extent of snow, and about soil moisture. So how is that all going to result in how much water is going to be in our streams and rivers? As you can see here, this map is from our friends at the Colorado Basin River Forecast Center. And this shows that throughout the river district, we are expecting below average runoff, anywhere between 30 and 70%, as indicated by these dark red and brighter red triangles at each of these locations. When we dive in a little bit deeper, we're going to look at three main sites. So first, the Yampa River at Deer Lodge Park. And I'm going to provide two numbers here. The first number is going to be the 90% exceedance, and that means there's a 90% chance that the basin will generate this amount of water at this location. The second number is the 50% exceedance, which has a 50% chance that basin will contribute or yield that much water at this location. The reason I provide this range of forecasts is because in these dry years and warm years, such as this one, we tend to see that these forecasts go down over time, so that what we're actually going to observe is likely going to be somewhere between these two probabilities, the 90% exceedance and the 50% exceedance. So for the Yampa River at Deer Lodge Park, we're expecting between 344,000 acre feet and 475,000 acre feet, which is between 31% of the median and 43% of the median. Similarly, at the Colorado River at Cameo, we're expecting between 774,000 acre feet and just over a million acre feet, which again puts us in that 30 to 40% of median flow for the April through July period. And then last but not least, the Gunnison River, where we're expecting at Grand Junction, where we're expecting between 394,000 acre feet and 542,000 acre feet. All in all, what this really shows us, the take-home point, is that the runoff forecast for the major river basins within the river district boundaries are going to be ranging between 30 and roughly 50% of what we would typically see in a normal type year. Now that we've talked about the water supply forecast, I would like to play a quick game of what I like to call Will It Fill? And we'll kind of play this game for three major reservoirs throughout the district's boundaries. And what this map quickly shows is it shows the percent of median reservoir storage at major reservoirs throughout the basin. And as you can see, there's a lot of warm colors, reds, oranges, and yellows, which indicate below median storage for that time of year, March 1st. So starting at Elkhead Reservoir, Elkhead needs about 7,000 acre feet to fill. It's forecast to receive between 13 and 24,000 acre feet. So I would say yes, Elkhead Reservoir is expected to fill this year. Moving down to the Colorado River Basin at Wolford Mountain Reservoir, which needs approximately 25,000 acre feet to fill. The forecast is between 12 and 18,000 acre feet. And based on that forecast, it's unlikely that Wolford Mountain Reservoir will fill this year. And then finally, moving to the Gunnison River Basin and Blue Mesa Reservoir, Blue Mesa needs about 413,000 acre feet to fill and is only expected to receive between 214 and 279,000 acre feet. So will Blue Mesa Reservoir fill? I think it's a pretty sure bet that Blue Mesa Reservoir will not fill this year. Moving on, I'd like to just touch on some seasonal outlooks as far as what we can expect for temperature and precipitation throughout the river district boundaries this spring and summer. So on the left here, we have the seasonal temperature outlook. And again, just remember that these are probabilistic forecasts, so it's no guarantee, but it gives us an idea of what generally we might be expecting to see over this time period of April through June. So as far as temperature, unfortunately, we're going to continue to see those warm temperatures where they'll likely be above normal with a 50 to 70% chance. As far as precipitation, these dry conditions appear to want to persist through the April, May, June time period, where we're leaning below normal precipitation with a 40 to 50% chance. Now, extending further out into the summer, July through September, we still see that same persistent warm weather where we're likely to see above normal temperatures, 50 to 60% chance. But there's been one change in the seasonal precipitation outlook, which is actually nice to see, and that is a 40 to 60% chance of above normal precipitation. And I can tell you that this graph or this map has been updated. The update between February and March has brought in these above chances of above normal precipitation, which could be indicative of a monsoon, which would certainly be welcomed, especially this summer. So now that we've referenced or gone through the hydrology within the river district boundaries, I would like to take just a quick look at the hydrology within the broader Colorado River. So here you can see the map of the Colorado River Basin. In the upper basin states, this is kind of that dividing line where above that you have the upper basin states of Colorado, Wyoming, Utah, New Mexico. And below that line, you have the lower basin states of California, Nevada, and Arizona. And as you can see here, there's two major reservoirs, Lake Powell here, which is the upper basin states storage account, and Lake Mead here, which is the lower basin states storage account. Now, obviously, the hydrology of the Colorado River is tremendously important given the American West's reliance on this river. So, what have we seen in the upper Colorado River Basin? Well, we've seen here that precipitation is actually not that far off normal. It's 85% of median currently. And I'd say a large portion of that was attributable to this mid-October storm where you see this blip in the black line where it kind of shot straight up. Those were those strong storms that Southwest Colorado received, Southwest Colorado and the desert Southwest received in the middle of October. And so, although we're at 85% of normal precipitation for this time of year, you can see that snow water equivalent lags much further behind that. And again, that lag is largely attributable to the very warm temperatures that we've seen this winter within the upper Colorado River Basin. Now, in the upper Colorado River Basin, we rely on the storage that is snowpack. So when we see 47% of snowpack, it can be alarming. Looking at the Colorado River Basin, or the upper Colorado River Basin, excuse me, and the average annual temperatures that we've seen in the basin starting in the late 1800s, we see that although there is some variability, so along the x-axis here we have just years progressing through time, and the y-axis is in temperature. And we see a large or a fair amount of annual variability between temperatures from year to year. But what you see in regard to a trend is that we've increased almost three or just over 3.5 degrees over starting since 1895. And what we know about increasing temperatures is that for every 1 degree Fahrenheit in rise, we see the stream flow actually diminishes by 4 to 7%. And that can largely be attributable to increased evapotranspiration. So, how have those rising temperatures, what have they done to natural flow in the Colorado River? Well, this graph shows exactly that. So, this graph shows annual flow at Lee's Ferry starting in 1906. And so this is increasing acre feet up to 25 million at the top and time moving forward. So what you can see is in the 20th century, the Colorado River averaged just over 15 million acre feet per year. However, given that trend in temperature that we just referenced, we see that the 21st century has dropped nearly 19%, that natural flow down to 12.4 million acre feet, which is certainly concerning for a river that so many people in the American West rely upon. Now, what have these declining flows done to storage at those two major reservoirs, Lake Mead and Lake Powell? Well, this graph shows just that, where this is kind of a graph that shows in light blue the capacity of Lake Mead, and in dark blue, the storage in Lake Powell. And the combined would be this line on the top. So what we've seen is, the reservoirs were constructed and slowly they filled throughout time until 1983, when we actually saw both reservoirs full. And in fact, they were installing plywood on the top of Glen Canyon Dam to prevent water spilling over the dam into the spillway. Now, what you can see is over time, that's slightly declined and then rebuilt storage. But what's shown right here is the start of the millennial drought in 2000. And as can be seen, that millennial drought resulted in a drastic reduction in storage between Lake Powell and Lake Mead. That in 2007, the interim guidelines were adopted to try to help prevent that decline in storage between the two reservoirs. But unfortunately, what we see is those guidelines did not do enough to maintain storage elevations in each of these reservoirs. And we've seen record low storage amounts more recently, where Lake Powell dropped to as low as 3521 feet of elevation. So, given all of this hydrology update, this should now set the stage for Lindsay DeFreitas, who is the Deputy Director of Communications and the Public Information Officer at the River District, who I will now pass it off to.
Thank you so much, Caleb, for painting such a rosy picture of our reality for me to pick up here. Give me 1 second to share my screen and I will jump right in. Apologies, I have just a minute of lag here on my Zoom window. All right, hopefully you folks can all see that. Just to recenter us in the conversation, our work at the Colorado River District is primarily as an advocacy organization for the 15 counties that we represent. There are a lot of fast-moving conversations that will have long-term consequences for all of the folks who reside within our counties. And so one of the things that we do here is to make sure that the expert voices that we have in our office, such as Caleb and our other engineers, technical team, our legal team, our work in policy, are heard by the people who are making these decisions. So in my presentation today, I'm going to go through a little bit of that work. And we're going to start in just a minute with the big picture, picking up where Caleb left off with Lake Powell and the Colorado River system. I'm going to touch briefly on a part of that conversation, which will have direct implications for Western slope water users around conserved consumptive use. And we're going to talk about the Shoshone water rights preservation effort, which is one of the real bright points in the work that we do. And then I will hand it off to Melissa Wills to talk about some more of the local solutions. So after listening to Caleb and then some of the information I'm about to share with you, if you get a little bit bogged down in the gloom and doom, we will have an uptick in hopeful and the way to engage to make a difference in these conversations after we cover some of the realities that we're facing. So what I have in front of me here is just a breakdown of the 7 states that rely on the basin, looking at them in a bit of a different way. I want to cover the differences between the upper division states here, Wyoming, Utah, Colorado, and New Mexico, and the lower division states of Nevada, California, and Arizona, and the way that the 1922 River Compact took a look at the river in front of them and said, we need to split this up. The upper division states are lagging in their development. There's just less people there, and the lower division states were charging ahead with claiming the water of the river through the prior appropriation system. And so representatives from Colorado at the time recognized that we needed to make some shifts in the way that the river was managed. And so they decided to split the river in two. They said 7.5 million acre feet can be used by the upper basin states, and 7.5 million acre feet can be developed by the lower basin states. And if we split that down the middle, all of these areas will have a chance to develop in their own way on their own time. There's also an assignment of water to Mexico that was brought back a little bit later and attached to the compact as part of this growing law of the river. The lower basin states have access to some tributary water from different rivers. And then throughout this system, as the law of the river continued to build upon the compact's foundation, the lower division states built Lake Mead to store water as the savings account, just like Caleb described, and Lake Powell a little bit later became the savings account for the upper basin states. On paper, this was an equitable division. And at the time, we know that we should have had less of a rosy view of the amount of water available. Because what's happened over time as the river has dropped is that the upper division states have never been able to fully develop their allotment. In fact, 4.2 million acre feet is sort of the max amount of usage, the average use in these states, in the 4 upper division states, not even approaching the 7.5 that were allotted on paper. Whereas lower division states have continued to use water in excess of the amount assigned to them on paper, in up to 11.5 million acre feet, with some as an average, and then some max numbers that I'm going to take a look at here in just a minute. We know too, within this breakdown of these 4 states, that Colorado has an average use of about 1.9 million acre feet in the most recent studies. From 1971 to 2024, that's our average use, which is quite a bit less than the on paper amount that Colorado is allotted of something like 3.8 million acre feet. So what we know is that the reality is split. We have 4 states in the upper division that are living within the means of the river as it's provided each year, with that huge amount of variability and the trend towards increasing drought conditions. And the lower division states have not had to make that change yet. I'm showing you this graph again to kind of take us from that point in time that Caleb discussed, We saw this management structure, this law of the river, all of these foundational agreements worked well enough until we hit the early 2000s, where severe drought changed the way that the river worked. And that's that precipitous drop heading into 2005. 7 states came together and in 2007 agreed that we needed to operate this river differently. The storage system was not enough. But that tiering structure, the agreements that managed the levels of Lake Mead and Powell kind of in the same way, as you can see with those ups and downs that sort of reflect each other between both storage accounts, that worked okay again until we hit even drier conditions. And we have not diminished the use in the lower basin. And so we saw Lake Powell bottom out in 2021, and that kicked off this sort of focus of where we are now, of how do we renegotiate the way that we use this water? How do we come back to an understanding of the river we're dealing with? How do we build on the law of the river? We can't throw it all out and start again, but we need to take a hard look at the hydrology that's in front of us and recognize that difficult choices need to be made. And I want to go down and kind of break down something I've said a few times, and that is this idea of lower basin overuse. What does that mean? We understand that 7.5 million acre feet was allotted, plus some tributary use, bringing their total on paper allotment to 8.5 million acre feet. On the left, there is a list of ways that ways that the lower basin has continued to overuse in excess of that amount. Evaporation loss, transit loss, that means seepage and transportation loss, and then an excess of tributary use. So what's happened is that they have an average use of 6.9 million acre feet. And within that is a loss of about 1.5 million acre feet every year of evaporation and transit loss. This amount has not been taken off of their credit, though. We understand that the lower basin has access to their full allotment and that the math is just different. In the upper basin, evaporation and transit loss is taken off the top before our water users get their water. And in the lower basin, it is the amount of water delivered to head gates and accessible to water users does not take into consideration this amount of water loss every year. Add to that the additional use of tributaries, and we see that 11.5 million acre feet overuse with a max of 12.9 million acre feet. And this has been continuous through most of those through the last 2 decades until very recent years, the last few years where shortage has finally been implemented. And that's why that system is not working. When you continue to release the same amount of water, regardless of how much is put into it, we do not see a balance. As a contrast and a discussion point, the upper division states, and especially Colorado and others, all face what we call natural shortages. And this word gets used a lot, and I added these pictures in here to kind of break down what that means. In these different basins that Caleb was just talking about, the Yampa, the main stem of the Colorado, and the Gunnison River, we have agricultural industries and communities that depend on family farms and ranches that have been working for multiple generations to stabilize communities and provide local food sources. But every year, those who operate those agricultural production operations don't know how much water they're going to get. So when we are planting seeds and we're deciding on the plan for the crop and for irrigation all summer, you don't know if you're going to get 100% or 50%. You don't know if in the Grand Valley, when you're thinking about your peaches, your apples, your stone fruits, you might have 60% of water available. And this has been the average of the last few decades that you're seeing displayed here. And in the Gunnison, thinking about corn production and other crops, it can vary so much between 60 and 80%. And every single one of these graphics represents a decision that a family has had to make about when to invest and how much, because we are managing our resources based on what's available. We know that drought has diminished the amount of water we have access to. And we know that each one of these decisions is another drop in how much water has been used. And so when you take out all of those choices, all of those shifts in crops, the less water that's available, that's how we get the average of 4.2 million acre feet. So while on paper it says 7.5 million acre feet, we know that that has not been used in the upper division states and especially in Colorado. Why are we hearing about this in national news, though? Why has this crisis been such a focal point for so many people in the last few weeks and months, especially? 7 representatives from different states are trying to decide and figure out how to manage this river going forward. And one of the driving factors is that we have infrastructure that demands we change the way we operate. Glen Canyon Dam is what forms Lake Powell on the Colorado River. And this is a good graphic that we borrow from the Bureau of Reclamation, because that's the organization that manages this infrastructure. Glen Canyon Dam not only creates Lake Powell, it is an essential part of power production through hydropower generation. And it depends on water flowing through these tubes that you can see noted here, right in the middle at 3,490 feet in elevation. Water has to stay at that elevation to be able to get into these tubes. It actually needs to stay a little bit above it to make sure that that pressure is adequately supported. And so in 2021, when the elevation dropped below what we call this protected level of 3525, a lot of folks started recognizing that we were going to have some real issues if it continued to drop. We could lose hydropower production. And then if it continued to drop below that, we may not even have a safe way of passing water through the dam. And so the Bureau of Reclamation recognized that we need to change the way we operate this infrastructure. We need to change the way that we manage this river. And they have asked the 7 states to find a consensus, an agreement on how to move forward and how to operate. And we have really struggled to do that. And it's understandable. The cost of what we're facing is tremendous. 40 million people, an enormous economy, 7 states with different politics and different needs and different economies, all of that depending on the management of this river. So it is a high pressure situation. And we know that the lower basin states want to see us conserve our use and cut use even more. And there's a few reasons for that. And we're going to look at, are things going to get better? The short answer is no. This is a complicated graph which traces time along the bottom, and it traces the elevation of Lake Powell along the y-axis going up. For all of the information provided in it, I'm just going to ask you to track the green line and the arrow, which is we are here. We are here today. If you remember the graphic you just saw, all of these lines represent a level in that graphic. As this green line ticks over them, we see changes happen in the way things are operated. The lower elevation balancing tier changes how much water can be released and impacts the levels of Lake Mead. And the dotted line labeled minimum power pool is the point when we will no longer be able to generate power in the Glen Canyon Dam. Based on what we know right now with the 24-month study of the Bureau of Reclamation, we will likely trigger the power pool minimum as soon as this year. Whether it's October or November may depend on whether the 7 states can come to an agreement on how to manage this resource. So in June, we're looking at the elevation balancing tier. In November, potentially passing power pool. A lot of folks right now are saying we're going to hit dead pool, and that is a different level. The power pool is related to the generation and the ability to safely pass water through the tubes that feed water into the turbines. Without those, we need to rely on the bypass tubes, which may be structurally unsound. Investigations continue, but it is a real cause for concern that using the bypass tubes below power pool could have severe implications for the integrity of the infrastructure around Lake Powell. Going back to this map view that Caleb introduced, we know negotiations have stalled, states have missed multiple deadlines, and the current guidelines expire at the end of September. The clock is really ticking. The federal government proposed alternatives without state consensus, and the Colorado River District, on behalf of the Western Slope, was one of many organizations to submit comments that offer some direct ways to readdress those alternatives. None of those alternatives solve the problem. None of them operate well in critical hydrology that we know we need to expect. Some of the things I want us to focus on, besides all of those graphs and all of those details, is what we expect to see in the next few months. We expect to see releases from the major storage accounts in Blue Mesa, Flaming Gorge, and Navajo reservoirs, which are part of the upper basin system. And this is to prop up those levels in Lake Powell. Along with that, we do expect to see reduced releases from Lake Powell. And this has a lot of implications and consequences for next steps. So what we could see is an upper basin conservation program, which is asking those states that are already facing natural shortages every year to find a way to create a fair market for those who do want to conserve their water and leave it in the system to help protect this infrastructure. We also might see compact compliance litigation, where the lower basin states do not see their amount of water sent down from Powell to Mead through the Grand Canyon in that 7.5 million acre feet average, or actually 8.23 million acre feet is what we think would trigger that. Averaged over 10 years, that trigger point is really close. And if compact compliance litigation were to happen, that means the lower division states sue the upper division states because we didn't deliver the water they think they deserve. That would throw a cloud over development in all 7 states because it would likely end up in the Supreme Court. And that's not something we want to see. These are problems that need to be solved by the water users involved in them, not by judges who are far, far away. So compact compliance litigation is a real concern. We may not see it. We're hopeful that there is still time to come up with a better solution that has consensus among the 7 states. And some of the things that we need to see in those solutions look like this. We have to restore supply and demand balance. We cannot keep overusing the system. And the lower basin needs to be where those cuts occur in the biggest way. The 1.5 million acre feet of loss from evaporation and from transit loss needs to be taken off the top, and then additional cuts need to be investigated. We need to make sure that the federal alternatives include accurate modeling and clear definitions. We can't leave sort of these open-ended, in addition, or extra cuts. The numbers need to be looked at really closely, and the impacts need to be explored. Ecosystem impacts, economies to local communities, the health of other systems that depend upon the river. All of that's required in a NEPA process, and that's something that we asked for very clearly in our comments letter. And then we also believe that long-term solutions are important. We cannot keep operating this system in crisis year to year. One of the things I thought I would touch on just briefly has to do with the idea of a conservation program. I'm not going to spend much time on this because we have a few more things to talk about. But the idea is that water in the river system could be sent down to Lake Powell and stored there as a protection against compact compliance issues. So it would be a pool of water kept in Lake Powell that would help protect the upper basin and allow them to continue releases. And we've investigated this before. Our state has participated in the System Conservation Pilot Project for several years. And the Colorado River District is on board with those kinds of creative solutions. And we recognize that our water users are often on the front lines of solving these problems, both for themselves and right now at the larger system level. But we have some big concerns. In those past iterations of the program, where water users were paid to not use water, where they were paid to leave it in the system, to send it down, to help support this whole structure, all of the participants in those programs came from Western Slope communities. And if you look at this map, the green areas show where people depend on water from the Colorado River system. That includes all of the Western Slope tributaries. And you can see those green areas are not limited to west of the Continental Divide. Front Range communities depend on the Colorado River. 50% of the water use in some of these communities comes across the divide, and they depend on this river as much as we do. And so they need to be as much of a part of the solution as our Western Slope water users have been. It needs to be a fair market structure that pays people adequately for the value of their water, and it needs to be managed at the local level to have the input of conservation districts who know their water users, of companies and water users themselves who have a way to say how this is going to help. The conservation programs are been offered by the upper basin in these negotiations, and so far the lower basin has not accepted any of these offers. So I'm going to pivot here away from the doom and gloom, and I'm going to take us back to a project that we're so excited about here in the Colorado River District because it speaks to all of the issues that we've just hit so hard in the last few minutes. The diminishing amount of water that's available, the need for long-term sustainable solutions, and the need for those solutions to come from the people who understand the river best. So the Shoshone Water Rights Preservation Coalition and the project to preserve these water rights has come together over the last few years as a major priority for the Western Slope and for the Colorado River District. So we are working together with a broad coalition to secure the historic flows that are tied to power production in the Shoshone hydropower plant as a way of making sure that regardless of the growth on the Front Range and the diminishing water resources available, we can protect the historic flows of the Colorado River for our communities and for those who depend on it even downstream. So let me show you where we are. This green circle in the middle is exactly where the Shoshone hydropower plant exists. And those are some of the oldest and largest non-consumptive rights on the entire main stem of the Colorado River. And we know that the doctrine of prior appropriation means that if you have the oldest water rights, those water rights are fulfilled before junior or younger water rights. This map indicates that indicates trans-basin diversions with these red arrows, and they're not proportional to size necessarily, but the location of Shoshone is so important. We know that the junior rights that send water across the divide out of the natural basin to the growing Front Range demands are counterbalanced by the location and by the age of the Shoshone water rights. These water rights draw water in off the main stem. They send them down to produce clean energy through hydropower production for Xcel Energy's grid, and then the water comes back to the river in full. So these water rights support the health of the river both above and below the location of the Shoshone plant. This means that we are supporting agriculture communities in Mesa County, recreation and ag in Garfield, and then all of the upstream communities also depend on these water rights because it keeps the river flowing. They're incredibly unique, and they were identified in some of our founding documents as the bottom card in this house of cards of water management across the state, and they need to be protected. So a few more things to think about why this has been such a priority for our district. West Slope water is under pressure in a big way. If you see the picture there, that's the canyon itself. It's a little bit hard to see, but there's a slightly lighter reddish green roof, or reddish brown roof. That's the Shoshone hydropower plant. It is located in one of the steepest, narrowest parts of Glenwood Canyon, and it is susceptible to wildfire, rockfall, mudslides, and all of these things have happened in the last 10 years. So what we're worried about is that if the hydropower plant were to go offline permanently, it wouldn't be able to call for these water rights. We need a way to make sure that that call is not lost, so that that water doesn't get siphoned off the top to feed the growing populations and needs of the Front Range communities. So that's that other added pressure. The Western Slope supplies so much of the water that the Front Range depends on, but taking that water out of its natural basin means it's gone forever. We know that we're seeing less snowpack and less water in the rivers. And then we also know that the family farms and ranches, which are so important to our local economy and to our local food sources, these are not operations that have a lot of extra space in their budget every year to deal with variability. They already deal with so much, and we know that the pressure on those producers is intense. The Shoshone water rights support this in a lot of different ways. Once again, these are large and very senior non-consumptive water rights on the Colorado River. Up to 1408 cubic feet per second of flow is commanded by these water rights. And so right now, for example, if I'm looking out my window at the Colorado River, I'm seeing a low river that has been between 700 and 800 cubic feet per second because that's all the water that's available. As more water becomes available, the Shoshone water rights can call for that water to keep flowing through the river, and every single drop counts. We have an economy that depends on that security, so the long-term water security for Western Slope communities, for planning purposes, for decisions around where that water is going to come from, whether it's for agriculture with farms and ranches and local food, or whether it's community growth. We depend on it for recreation. Colorado has a huge river recreation economy, and without that, we would see a drastic change in the way that our communities can support themselves. They depend on it for clean drinking water, and most importantly, they keep the rivers flowing west. So how are we going to do this? The Shoshone Water Rights Preservation Project was really signed in its current form in 2023 when Xcel Energy, or Public Service Company of Colorado, which is a subsidiary of Xcel, signed an agreement with the Colorado River District to sell the water rights for $99 million. And there's a bit of sticker shock immediately when you hear that number. But when you think about the value of water and how it's increasing over time, and the fact that the structure of this deal means it's not just 1 decade or 2 decades or 1 generation or 2, it is in perpetuity, that becomes pennies on the dollar. So the first piece is to come up with an agreement with the state of Colorado to add in-stream flow as a beneficial use to the Shoshone water rights. And this is our green box on the screen. This was already accomplished, and it is a huge step forward. Last fall, the Colorado Water Conservation Board accepted our proposal to add the Shoshone water rights to their in-stream flow management program. This means that even if the power plant of Shoshone were to go offline for any reason, we would still be able to call that water to the same point to protect the historic flow that benefits the entire Western Slope. Now, there's a few more steps and a lot of work to do, but that alone is a huge step forward. And it was a unanimous 8-0 vote in support of this effort. It's a really clear indicator that the state of Colorado sees the value in this project. We are in the middle of fundraising, but we have had a tremendous start. Over 57 million has already been committed by state and local sources, and that's over 17 million just from local water conservation districts, counties, towns, other regional organizations who have said, yes, we know that this water right is essential to our future. The state of Colorado, committed 20 million, and we are also funding 20 million out of our community funding partnership program, which Melissa will speak about a little bit next. We have an agreement. We were offered an award through the Inflation Reduction Act of 40 million. That award is under review by the federal government right now, but we are very certain that funding will not be an issue. We will get the money. We will make it work. This is too important of an opportunity to lose. Also in progress is the water court case. Once the state said, yeah, we'll take that for in-stream flow, we think that's a good idea, we need to send that back to the Water Court of Colorado to make sure that there's no injury or expansion that's going to negatively impact other water users. Our water court process is very thorough, and we are making sure that we have the best case in front of people. And I think the value is going to become very clear. And then Public Utilities Commission would need to approve the final contract. So once again, we have really enjoyed wide regional support, bipartisan support, small groups that are committing 5,000, Garfield County, Eagle County that are in the millions, Mesa County, Summit and Grand. All of these have signed off to say, yes, we are ready for Shoshone water rights to be protected because we know that the future of our communities depends on it. So as we move through this process over the next few months, definitely expect to hear more. Please consider signing up for our newsletter so that you can stay in the loop and we can let you know how you can help us protect the Colorado River District. And I'm going to stop talking there and hand this over to Melissa Wills, who is going to jump in and give you a little bit more of insight about the local solutions that we are offering and supporting here in the Colorado River District.
Okay, thank you, Lindsay. Yeah, Lindsay and Caleb continue to set me up on a straight path towards positivity. You know, I bet a lot of you watching this are feeling the anxiety of what's coming this spring and what's coming this summer and into the future years. But I'm going to tell you something important to remember, that projects are happening in your community that are helping users like you adapt to a hotter and drier climate. And ultimately, if we're going to make an impact, it's going to start on the ground, one project at a time. So we have a great lens to understand this local impact through the Colorado River District, and this is through the Community Funding Partnership. Now, this is a program that is our flagship grant program that was born 5 years ago. So today I'm going to dive into who we are, what we've done in 5 years, the impact we've seen in your communities here across the 15 counties of our district. So to start off, it's important to note that we started through a ballot initiative that had over 72% support across 15 counties within Colorado. Now, this is 72% support from our voters that recognized that our users are facing unprecedented pressures. We have aging infrastructure that most of it is over a century old and needs to be replaced and updated. We have this call to balance demand and supply, but at the same time, we have climate change knocking on our door, making this more and more difficult. And to add on to this, we do not have the financial nor institutional capacity to be able to tackle every problem, every water crisis, and every need on the ground. But with these pressures that we have experienced day in, day out, our water users, our communities have prevailed. And we know this because we've seen incredible success through our program. So the Community Funding Partnership provides $4.2 million on average annually to high impact water projects. Now, when you hear the term high impact water projects, this is a vast term, and this is purposeful. We wanted to be able to fund projects that communities come to us and say, this is our priority, this is the project we want to fund, that we need support for. And we have seen this vast diversity of types of projects across our 15 counties in the past 5 years. Now, when we built the program, it was evident from our voters and from our county commissioners and leaders across our 15 counties that we needed to build a program that was accessible. We have provided grants as small as $5,000 to multi-million-dollar projects. Knowing that we were a local solution, a local funder on the ground, we needed to make sure that anyone could come and apply for a grant. We look for projects that have public benefit, that make public funds go farther, that have multiple benefits, that are projects that are born out of a community vision and community support. And of course, $4.2 million is not a lot when it comes to water projects, but we have found this niche where we can use our funds to draw on local, state, and federal funding, bringing large tranches of fund here on our 15 counties within our district. So with these guides, we have set 5 multiple benefits that we look for in projects. Again, trying to make sure our public funds go that much farther. So we have 5 benefits we look for in projects, and we look for at least 2 in each project, whether this is updating aging infrastructure, supporting our ag users in continuing to produce the food and fiber that we need, projects that improve the conservation or efficiency of systems, improving our watershed health, water quality, and of course, supporting the health of our rivers. These 5 areas represent the priorities that our voters identified within our initial ballot initiative 5 years ago. Now, it's important to note that this program was born initially with this opportunity to provide grants through our general grants for multi-benefit projects. And very early on, upon the creation of this program, it became evident that we did not have many opportunities for funding for emergencies. And so we have an opportunity that funds projects that essentially remediate the fiscal impact of an emergency. So for example, if your ditch blows out in some flood event that was unpredicted, essentially we'll be able to provide funds to remediate those costs so that you as a user can rebuild the ditch and of course keep irrigation moving through your system and your operations online. We also have our accelerator grants that were born in 2022, essentially to fund the necessary application materials such as grant writing, design, engineering, permitting, whatever you need to apply for a federal grant. I'm going to talk about this a little bit more. And of course, we have our irrigation company financial sustainability toolkit that essentially works with our water users and our ditch companies to look at what are the needs on your ditch and what are the rates and grants available to meet those needs, to replace that infrastructure, to improve your efficiency of your system. So the accelerator grants, as I mentioned, were born in 2022 when large tranches of federal funding came online. And it became evident that to apply for a federal grant, for example, many of the successful applications required over 60% design completed. This is expensive. And so knowing this, seeing this, we have opened this opportunity to pay for up to 85% of the cost to apply for a federal grant. And we've seen incredible return. For every dollar invested, we have received $64 in federal return. Now, I have 3 pieces of good news for you on this. First of all, the Bureau of Reclamation has recently released their Water Smart grants. Again, there are 3 to 4 available right now that we can apply for, and more coming this year, according to the Bureau of Reclamation. We also have found success in this program in applying for NRCS grants, whether it's PL 566, EQIP, again, supporting our ag users in adjusting to a hotter and drier climate. And lastly, I would say we have also used this opportunity to help folks apply for state grants, drawing on the large tranches of fund that are available in Colorado today. Now, I will say that 5 years has flown by, but something to know today is that in 5 years, we have funded $32 million in grants. We have leveraged $98 million in local, state, federal funding. This is $98 million here on the ground on the Western Slope. And of course, this is just over or just under a little under 150 grants across our 15 counties. Now, what does this look like? Well, if you break it down, about 77 of the projects incorporated some aspect of an agricultural infrastructure project. Again, supporting our ag users and producing the food and fiber that we need daily. We have funded 30 research studies. This is 30 studies helping us gather the data and research to support us in making informed decisions when it comes to our water use and water management. We have funded 3.6 miles of river restored. This is actually a fair amount knowing the price of river restoration today. And of course, 16 projects in drinking water and water quality, ensuring that we have access to the vital source that every human and plant needs. Now, the best way to explain what we do is through an example. The Tear Ditch and Reservoir Company is one of my favorite projects, not that I'm biased, but because it tells a great story. They came to us for an accelerator grant of $33,000, ultimately to apply for funding through the state and federal opportunities to ultimately pipe a little over a mile of their ditch that was experiencing ditch breaches, leaking, etc. So the good news is that we provided the accelerator grant and they were able to secure about $1 million in local, state, and federal funding because we helped fund the initial engineering and grant writing to do so. So this now has secured $1 million here in Delta County within our 15 counties to be able to pipe a mile of ditch. This is a story worth telling. Now, there's many stories I could go on and on about, but I would like to direct you to our newly produced dashboard, which Haley's going to drop a link in the chat to access. This will enable you to filter through our projects by date, by basin, by county, and understand what projects are happening throughout our 15 counties. Now, this also serves another purpose. If you are interested in a project, let's say your municipality looking to secure a redundant water source, or you are a nonprofit looking into conducting a mile of river restoration, or you are an agricultural producer that needs to replace your headgate and update your diversion that's causing excessive bank erosion, there are examples on here, and there are communities that you can connect with to learn more from. So I encourage you to dive into our dashboard to learn more on what we have completed in the past 5 years. Now, we don't have time to show this video. Again, Haley's going to drop the link in the chat, but we have a video that does a far better job than I can in explaining the impact and the reason why we, the Community Funding Partnership through the River District, continue to provide grants. The Campbell family worked with us to produce a video that showcases their usage of water within, I guess, the general Delta County within Paonia. They are a fifth generation ranching family and have definitely found a niche and be able to explain what does it mean to rely on water for your livelihood, and why is that important to that not only their family but their greater community in the greater Colorado River Basin. So I encourage you to jump online after this webinar and watch this film. It's definitely worth viewing. So all this to say, you know, again, we would love to remain an accessible funding program. So please connect with me. You can go on our website and go literally link to my calendar, and I'll be able to talk to you on the phone with any idea you have. I'm here to throw spaghetti at the wall and think through ideas or talk through a project if you are shovel ready. So again, I want to leave you today with some good news. There are projects being done here on the Western Slope. We are working as communities to adjust to this new reality. And really, there is positive movement across our communities. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Amy Moyer. She's going to host our question and answer session, and we'll go from here. Thanks again.
Thank you so much, Melissa. I'm going to invite Lindsay and Caleb and Melissa to turn their cameras on and stay on screen. Thank you so much to all of you for the great presentations. And two quick things before we move into questions. I want to note that we covered a lot of information. There's a lot going on across our basin, all of our rivers. We're facing an extremely dry year. And I want to provide a reminder that we remain very true to our mission. So again, the Colorado River District, we were founded in 1937. We represent 15 counties on Colorado's western slope. Our mission is to protect water on the western slope for our farmers and ranchers, for our communities, for those that rely on the rivers for their drinking water. We are going to be honest about the pressures and risks that we face, whether it's lower basin overuse, front range growth, the dry conditions that we are seeing this year. But we're very committed to working on solutions, working with our water users to really confront that head on. Secondly, we have again covered a lot today. I want to remind folks of some of the QR codes that you saw on slides. We have a news drop here at the Colorado River District, managed by Lindsay, that comes out twice a week, that provides updates on Colorado River District activities, provides a summary of news stories across the Western Slope, the broader basin, across the state. So please go to coloradoriverdistrict.org, sign up for the news drop. It's a great way to stay engaged with us and stay engaged with what's happening across your rivers. Again, feel free to put questions in the Q&A box. We're going to cover a few as we wrap up here today. The first one I want to turn to is a comment that we received from our friends at the NRCS, and it relates back to Caleb's presentation on hydrology, that yes, not only are we seeing an extremely low snowpack, low water year, we're also seeing early and rapid snow melt across our river districts that are outside of our standard April to July stream flow forecasts. So not only are we going to see lower rivers, the bulk of this river of the water is going to come much earlier than normal. And so the question I have for Caleb is, we know this year is going to be tightly administered. We know we're seeing restrictions across the board. How can water users prepare for a water year like this?
Yeah, thanks, Amy, and thanks, Carl, for your comment in the Q&A. That was a really good point. That what I was speaking a lot to the snow water equivalent, and the fact that snow water equivalent throughout the district has peaked about a month early. Well, that's you're exactly correct that has a strong correlation with the runoff in the stream occurring about a month earlier this year as well. So with that being said, what can water users do to prepare? I would say first and foremost is water users can be prepared to receive their water much earlier than they would anticipate this year. So things like getting your head gate ready, ensuring your flume is operating and measuring correctly, that your irrigation infrastructure is ready to be put to use, I think are all good things that water users can do proactively to be ready for the early and small amount of runoff we are going to see this year. Additionally, I think there are other actions that water users could look at, such as things that can make the limited amount of water that they may receive this year go further. So whether that's cleaning your ditch a little bit more this year, or dealing with that spot in the ditch that tends to seep, so that you can really do more with the limited amount of supply that you're going to receive. I think any little thing from, again, ditch maintenance and repair to things like leaky valves, I think any little thing will help this year, where we're really seeing those low amounts of runoff.
Thank you, Caleb. We also have a question on funding for the Shoshone water rights preservation effort. So, quick reminder that Lindsay covered the $99 million purchase price to acquire those water rights. We have 57 million secured across state and local funding. Just want to make a reminder and a strong thank you. We have 39 different local partners that have collectively contributed over 17 million. All of those decisions, which is very rare for any local issue, especially a water issue, have been unanimous. And so it's a testament to just the strong coalition we have behind the Shoshone water rights acquisition effort. But the question surrounds the 40 million that we received. An award from the federal government remains on hold, remains unobligated to date. And so the question is, how are we feeling in terms of the certainty on that federal funding? What might we do to finalize that purchase price? Lindsay, do you want to comment on that?
Sure. Thanks, Amy. Well, I think one of the certainties that we have is the benefit that protecting these water rights does have for quite a few significant federal investments, whether it's some of the infrastructure that we were talking about or the public lands that the river runs through that our economies depend on. We've done some studies that show there's a significant return on that investment. And so our application still stands on its own merit to the federal government and that return that they would receive by supporting it. And then what you identified is really, though, my brightest point in what's going to come next is the broad-based coalition support that we've seen throughout the state. So we know that the local government entities and the leadership and regional organizations have made commitments of a little over $17 million in addition to ours and the state. And what we've seen throughout that process is folks coming up to us and asking how they can do more. So while we're going to continue to work with the federal government and again highlight those benefits that play out throughout the entire system, we do know that the West Slope solves West Slope problems better than anyone else. And we have enjoyed that support from across our region, regardless of political affiliation or the types of economies in these different areas. So our hope and our certainty is that working closely with those supporters and being a part of this motivated coalition that has stood up for the importance of this project, we're going to find a way forward.
Yeah, thank you, Lindsay. And we often get asked, how can I get involved? What can we do? We're going to rely on absolutely everybody to get this project to the finish line. So you have the link in the chat from Haley, but go to keepshoshoneflowing.org. You can learn more about this project as it moves forward through the process. Maybe one more quick question for Lindsay while we're talking about Shoshone is, I thought this was done. I thought we completed it last November. We saw the celebration of the state accepting these water rights into the in-stream flow program. Tell us more about that.
Well, it was a huge moment of celebration. There was, again, a unanimous 8-0 support for our in-stream flow proposal. But as you'll remember from the slide I shared about the layout of the purchase and sale agreement, there are 4 key contingencies. So it's similar to when you go under contract to purchase a property. You say, I'm going to pay this much, but I need to check these things before the contract is finished, or I need to meet my funding obligations. And so that's sort of where we are right now. We're committed to the purchase price of $99 million with PSCO, or Public Service Company of Colorado, and Excel. We're working our way through the funding solution. We have locked in one of those 4 key contingencies, and that's what you saw celebrated in November, the in-stream flow proposal being accepted by the state of Colorado. So the other 3 pieces are going to play out over the next few years. The water court case is a big focus of ours as well, along with this funding effort. So while that milestone should not be diminished because it was an incredible step forward, there is some more work to do.
Thank you, Lindsay. And one last question as we wrap up. I want to turn to Melissa. Thank you for the presentation on the Community Funding Partnership. Can you remind us, for those that are listening online and have a project that may benefit from funding, how do they get started to talk with you about their project idea?
Yeah, no, thank you, Amy. The best way is go to our website, coloradoriverdistrict.org. Haley put the link in our chat. And there is a page for the Community Funding Partnership that describes all our different opportunities. But the best aspect of the page is a link to my calendar where you can set up a quick 15-30 minute call and we can talk about your project ideas, or brainstorm different avenues when it comes to making a difference in your community. So pretty easy, and would love to talk to anyone.
Thank you, Melissa. I will turn it over to Lindsay just as we wrap up in this last minute. Thank you all for joining this virtual State of the River. We have 8 more State of the River events available in person across our district, so please look for those. And Lindsay, any final words as we wrap up?
No, I think you nailed it, Amy. Just an encouragement to look for your local State of the River, because what we also bring to those is partnership with the local water organizations that are really connected with the issues in the community. And those organizations play such a critical part of us being able to achieve our mission here. So if you want more and you want to get connected at the local level, please visit our website about the State of the River events, find one that's local to you, and then reach out if you have any questions. We are more than happy to get in touch with you.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. We're going to sign off, and we appreciate everyone for joining. Thanks so much.